4th, 2014, 4 p.m. Ms. Vach, please do the roll call.
Mr. Pizzuccelli?
Here.
Ms. Avery?
Here.
Mr. Hetty?
I am here.
Mr. Coteau?
Here.
Mrs. Chandler?
Here.
Chairman Dake?
Here, if you would please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Vach has one announcement to make for when we're finished with public input. Ms. Vach?
Yeah, there will be a short video that will be showing. Actually, Mrs. Chandler had sent this to me earlier, so if you want to explain what it is, Penny.
I'll let Ms. Chandler explain it. Go ahead.
I can't remember if you sent it out to all of us or what, but I had requested that a video that shows Marco Rubio talking to the administrator for the Federal Railroad Administration. It's an exchange comments back and forth. I thought it would be helpful for the public to see.
Thank you very much. We're on number 3 now, approval of minutes. I know everyone's had a moment to look at the minutes, or many moments. I'll entertain a motion for approval, or if there's any changes.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Vach, call the roll.
Mr. Pizzuccelli?
Since I was not here at the last meeting, I'll have to pass.
Okay, Ms. Avery?
Do I vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Hetty?
Yes.
Mrs. Chandler?
Yes.
Mr. Coteau?
Yes.
Chairman Dake?
Yes. Okay, we'll move to number 4, public inputs. Right now, we're open for public comments. Step right upstairs, state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Peter Gorey. I'm chairman of the Finance Commission of the City of Vero Beach. I live at 2021 Granada Avenue in the city. I'd like to make just a short a presentation regarding some research I've done on the proposed high-speed rail, mainly because there are some areas which will, in fact, come before the Finance Commission regarding the economics as it affects the city of Vero Beach. The sources that I used in compiling this information and the opinions and the data is all mine, is I went on to various websites, governmental, national, state, and local media, minutes of your commission meetings, Amtrak's, All Aboard Florida, various and sundry business publications. Some of them were railroad-centric, and public advocates. However, I relied heavily on Mr. Donald Smith, who's an executive vice president of the Alaska Railroad from 1999 to 2010. And he provided information on technology, operations, economics, regulation, personnel, union issues, and construction. And from that, I would want Mr. Chairman to present this to the Commission. I'm going to do it in 3 parts. One is very briefly on the environmental, because I know you have spent a significant amount of time. I just want to bring out some facts on that. Secondly, the issue of jobs that would be created by this project, either at startup or ongoing. And then finally, what I want to focus on is the economics and the business model. In 15 hours, from 6 a.m. to 12 midnight, there will be 32 one-way AAF trains, assuming, this is my assumption, simultaneous northbound and southbound departures. There will be more than 2 per hour, not including freight. For the city of Vero Beach, currently, there is freight traffic throughout the day, but especially between 7 and 9 in the morning. And 5 and 6 at night. Further, the widening of the Panama Canal and some future potential lifting the Cuban embargo, South Florida port tonnage and freight transport will indeed be significantly increased. Northbound trains travel approximately 2 hours to reach the city of Vero Beach. Southbound trains would take approximately 45 minutes to reach the city, which means that these two trains will pass close to the city of Vero Beach within minutes of each other. Thank you very much. Mr. Hetty, would you just comment on what you just showed me, please?
Mr. Roberts from All Aboard Florida was asked a question about where they would cross, and he was kind enough to provide us with that information. And the northbound and the southbound All Aboard Florida trains will pass each other at mile point 226, which is Aviation Boulevard. So, you know, from my point of view, Peter, that's a good thing, because it essentially means that there's one crossing through the city per hour, two trains, but it's essentially close together. And
except that people may not expect trains coming in both directions. Either way, I just wanted to make that as a point in terms of what the midpoint's going to be, because both of them, I don't know about your quiet zones, I really don't want to get into that, but with the horns blowing and so forth. But indeed, it's going to go through up to 11 o'clock at night.
Right, but essentially we wind up with the trains crossing through Vero Beach essentially at once an hour, within a couple of minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's true. There's also freight that is appliqued on that, but that's true. I just want to make a note that the Acela Express from New York City to Boston, it's approximately 250 miles. It has 13 at-grade crossings, 13. And there's none in the major metro areas. There has been a major thrust, because there were some fatalities on that line, to insulate the crossings, the grade crossings. As I understand, as I said, there's 130 grade crossings in the 200 miles from Miami to Coker. In international high-speed rail, essentially there are no at-grade crossings. What I found out in the research is that the railroad does not have to pay ad valorem taxes on any of the properties that they own. However, those, and this affects ratables, potentially there could be a downside impact on the ratables and values of properties adjacent to the railroad tracks. The second part is the creation of jobs and the economic impact.
Peter, just a quick question.
Sure.
The train doesn't, they don't pay ad valorem tax on the property that they have rights of way. On the property that they own outright, they do pay ad valorem tax. Mr. Roberts, is that correct?
Hang on for a second, because we can't hear Mr. Roberts from the audience. Those are good questions, Mr. Hetty. If we can let Mr. Peter Gorey just keep moving. And
well, yeah, but if there's a concern, if there's a concern, Mr. Chairman, please, if there's a concern where there's a fact being given out,
right,
I think that it's more meaningful to the public that you identify the concern at the time rather than to let some misinformation go out. And in all fairness to the railroad, they do pay ad valorem tax on the land that they own.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy, for your comments. If we could, I'd like Mr. Gorey to keep going through your presentation. I do have questions on the tax issue, but if you would keep moving forward.
Yeah, and clearly that only applies to the ad valorems to the roadbeds. I apologize not making that clear. We're talking about job creation. I've read the information that has been provided, and it talks about purchases of equipment, material as an economic boom, which is absolutely accurate on a macro basis. The rolling stock has to be, the locomotives, the rails, all have to be manufactured. However, permanent jobs will be relatively limited. I think of train crews, maintenance personnel, ticket reservations, station staff, which will be the more permanent jobs. There's also an issue of union representation of employees. However, the equipment, material, construction crews require highly specialized technology and skilled workers to lay the rail and to so the majority of the jobs will be in the startup of the venture and will not be permanent. Now, obviously, there's a possible exception for the grades, making the grades and so forth on the roadbeds. But the actual laying of the rail and the equipment and the skilled workers required are not something that are in the local labor pool necessarily. And Florida East Coast may or may not have sufficient existing employees, which most likely would lead to contracting out to professionals. Then you get into this union issue in terms of who can work on the railroad. I don't even want to address that, but in the past that has been issues with bringing in contractors. The facility expansion, station improvements, roadbed signaling, rail infrastructure construction, presumably will be completed within 2 to 3 years. And then the permanent jobs would obviously stay. But I want to focus on the business model. According to what I read in the Press Journal, there are 32 one-way daily trips. Each train has 400 seats, which is 12,800 one-way seats daily. Acela fares, this is on the high-speed train for Amtrak, from D.C. to New York City, is along a 230-mile route. The fares range from $164 one way to, for first class, $375 one way. The average speed for a one-way trip in that route is 75 miles an hour, and based upon what I've read, from start to completion, the average, including station stop, for all aboard Florida is under 80 miles an hour. The Acela, D.C. to New York, averages 4,000 one-way riders per day with 3 intermediate stops in the metropolitan areas. Now, these metropolitan areas through which the Northeast Corridor in that piece has a population of 33 million. The service areas that are passing through the AAF route is approximately 7 million, which includes Orlando and the South Florida complex. Amtrak is also advantaged, if you will, by winter weather, when airplanes can't fly and the roads are treacherous. In addition, vehicle traffic and travel around the major areas in the Northeast Corridor is very congested. So there is difficulty in driving between these major metro areas. The issues that I want to address, and these are questions more than comments, the total travel time. From the time one gets off an airplane or a cruise ship or from home to the station, parking, taking a taxi, getting there in time to catch the train. So from point to point, from start to destination, adds considerable amount of time. In addition, where the high-speed trains go in major metropolitan areas, there is an infrastructure of connectivity of transportation, whether it be light rail, subways, or other transportation that hone in on those stations in which the train passes through. That is not the case in the Florida corridor. Travel time by automobile from Miami to Orlando is between maybe 3.5 hours. But it's from point to point, start to destination. The issues, as I mentioned, was this travel time, the timeline for completion of the project, $2.2 billion. What is the criteria for the $1.6 billion government loan, and why 32 one-way trips? What is the business model? What are the projected revenues and expenses? What is the fare structure? Jobs, technology, skills, unions, equipment, material cost, as well as initial estimates of operating expenses may be lower than what is forecasted, particularly as the completion date goes beyond 2015. Now, the cost to municipalities, which I know you've addressed, and Monty Falls has, and staff, is that the cost to municipalities for construction and maintenance of the grade crossings is, I know, an issue, which I need not, I know that you have spent considerable time on that. But I am circumspect about the economics. This is my opinion. There are only 3 operations worldwide with high-speed rail that are profitable: Paris, Lyon, Tokyo, Osaka, and Madrid, Barcelona. The routes are between major population cities. There is connectivity, rail and subways, into their respective cities. Gas prices are $10 a gallon, and there isn't such thing as interstate highways between these cities. So there is a reason for them to be profitable. Every other high-speed rail operation in Asia, Acela, and Europe are public entities and operate at a loss with a government subsidy. In closing, in 1997, the privately funded Florida Fun Train operated between Miami and Orlando using the CSX tracks in the center of the state. It went bankrupt a year later. Thank you. Questions?
I have a question. When you first started, I thought you were going to, as chairman of the Finance Commission, give us some idea of the financial impact on the city of Vero Beach in terms of our budget that this project would entail. So far, when I listened to your presentation, the only financial impact that you mentioned that would affect Vero Beach would be the cost of upgrading the crossings if we wanted to do quiet zones. Another question I would have, and you've identified the fact that this project probably, in your view, is subject to likelihood of failure because they don't have the financial, the business plan or the finances going forward that would mean it would be a profitable enterprise for, and therefore it would fail. Have you done any analysis of what the impact on Vero Beach would be financially if this project does fail?
No, because that would be speculative until I could see a business plan and understand it. Mm-hmm. Indeed, it is speculation. I don't know. That's why I asked the questions, not knowing what the ridership's going to be, what the estimated fares are going to be, and so forth in terms of what the maintenance. I just don't have that data.
Okay. Well, all that data has been submitted.
Copies
of it are available from our city clerk, where All Aboard Florida has provided estimates of the ridership they're anticipating from the existing travel going on between here and Miami, between Orlando and Miami, what their expectations are. And they have a business plan which they present in public meetings, which I've been attended and have seen. So the data, much of the data that you're asking for is already present in documents that have been filed with the city of Vero Beach.
Well, then I would welcome going over them in detail.
They're available. They're public information.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
That's why I was asking the questions. Having just begun to look at this, and from the Finance Commission, one of the things, I know that Monty has presented a number of data to you in terms of what potential, and the staff has, for the city of Vero Beach. In terms of the ratables, as I said, it's a hypothetical in terms of what it's going to affect the existing ratables and ad valorem for facilities and what an impact may have on business, and that's just observation as opposed to a.
Well, basically, what you're saying is that there will be no significant positive economic impact that you see in terms of additional jobs for any length of time. There will be some impact on cost, possibly on the city, if we have to increase investments or maintenance of crossing enhancements because of the speed of the train. Am I correct in reading that? Okay.
And excuse me.
And that the business plan, you're not convinced that this is going to be a successful operation.
Well, I just look at the rest of the world and what their success has been, and this is obviously going to be an operation that is going to be apart from what the rest of the world.
Well, I understand, and I just want to verify that that's what you were saying, because we've been hearing the same information from a number of people. Many of us have already concluded that ourselves, that this is a marginal, if anything, enterprise going forward, but I want to thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's important that other people within the city of Vero Beach who are appointed individuals do participate in this, because it is important going forward for the city. So thank you very much.
Mr. Pizzao, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question for you. You mentioned a $1.6 billion governmental loan.
Yes.
Has it been determined how many years it will be? Not at all. Or the interest rate?
I'm sorry, I don't know. That would be part of the business plan and the data which you say is available, but I haven't seen that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hetty?
Yeah, Peter, I too share your concerns and would like to see the business plan. I'm hearing that it's available in the city records. Tammy, I know you've sent out, I think, somewhere between 1 and 2 million pages of documents.
Right.
And I'm sure I could have missed it, but someplace in there, if there is that business plan, that the full-blown business plan from All Aboard Florida, could you see to it that that is emailed to both Peter and myself? Because and again, there's so many pages of documents. I haven't seen a business plan per se.
We need to first agree on what we say is a business plan. A business plan in a bank, looks at all the future investments, all the current asset values, and all the other kind of stuff that a firm would have. When I was referring to a business plan, which is most people are referring to, is on what basis does All Aboard Florida think they're going to be able to have the ridership that will make this a profitable enterprise.
All right,
They
well-
have presented that information.
Yeah,
They have
well-
said they need to capture 4% of the travel that right now takes place between Orlando and Miami area. They've stated that. They've put the numbers forward. That is the business plan that they have, and that's what's been questioned all in all is how do you think you're going to have 12,000 people a day get on your, going north and south, 12,000 going north, 12,000 going south a day. How do you justify that? They have submitted that information.
All right, can I modify my request then? Could you send to Tammy what you have that you're categorizing? Forget about what I categorize as a business plan. Would you send to Tammy for forwarding to Peter the documents that you say are a business plan? Because I'm not sure.
Well, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
No, what I'm looking for is a pro forma. I'm looking for what the cash flows are, what the operation costs are, what the carrying charges on the loans are, just as you would, and that's what I am discussing as a business plan, actually a pro forma with potential cash flows and assets and liabilities.
And when I've asked for such a document, I've been told that this is a private company and those documents were not available to me. And I think that if All Aboard Florida is going to apply for loans that are public loans that are public money, then I think that I should be entitled to see that. But having said that, I also think that this is a company that's putting up $1 billion. If you listen to the bottom line numbers, they're putting up $1 billion of their own money into this. It's a $2.5 billion project, and they're getting $1.5 billion out of the $2.5 billion in federal loans. I think that we're entitled to see something, but I also think that absent the loan, if a company thinks that they can make some money and it's not, the business plan is not something I would invest in, that's fine. This is their money. It's their company. And I'm not sure that as a governing agency, we should be making a business decision as to whether or not this is a good money-making plan or not. I think that the entity, which is from the Federal Rail, the entity that's going to make the decision on the loan, maybe should be looking at that and deciding. But I'm not sure that's something we should be beating up on.
Well, I just am trying to educate myself because there is going to be an impact on the city of Vero Beach in terms of what Mr. Falls mentioned in terms of what has to be done to upgrade the crossings. I don't want to belabor it. It's just my perspective from private enterprise, how in acquiring companies, we would, I work for AT&T in mergers and acquisitions, and that's what I was, my career was. And so I just trying to apply how my experience to what this venture is.
And there's one of the rubs, Peter, is that if they're spending their money, then they should be spending their money on the cost for the crossings too. It shouldn't cost the city of Vero Beach one dime for the changes in crossings. They want to come through, and they have the right to come through. That's fine. You spend your money, All Aboard Florida, on the changes that are necessary.
All I'm doing is trying to point to this, but I want to address, sir, the question, if you don't mind, about, I'm not saying there'll be no jobs created.
Okay.
I said on a macro basis there will be a significant amount of jobs, particularly the startup and the construction. The jobs that will be created will be in Florida. The train crews, the maintenance crews, the rail yard crews, the station staff, the ticket agents. So on that basis, there will be jobs created. But the proportion of transient to permanent jobs is what I was trying to address.
Yeah, I think I said, you said there would be no long-term significant increase in employment because of this project here in Vero Beach. Basically, is what you said originally. There would be no major economic benefit from jobs in Indian River County as such.
Well, that is correct.
All right,
As
that's
far
all.
as
That's all I was saying. I was agreeing with you, sir.
Yeah.
And Mr. Gorey, my request would be the following. The people of this community, they want to know what impact this high-speed train is going to have on our community. And you, as chair of the Finance Commission, I know you understand all the above. I request that you would start putting this on your agenda and start having a discussion with your fellow commission members on these issues, some of these issues that were addressed today, and also some of the concerns that you raised. We do have quite a bit of information, probably as you already know, on the site, and Tammy can help you get there. So that's my request, that if you could do that in the near future, please.
I certainly will put that on our agenda and pursue it, because we
Thank
have
you.
to work in tandem with all the work that you're doing to understand what that impact is going to be. And we're going into the budget season.
Yes.
And so for this year, I know that Jim and his staff are working toward the 1 month review of the budgets and what impact in the next fiscal year budget, potentially, it would have on the city of Vero Beach. So that is one of the issues that obviously we'll be working with the city staff on.
Well, Mr. Gorey, we heard recently, as late as today, I read an article that All Aboard Florida is now not looking to be able to be operational within Indian River County, at least north of the Palm Beach line, until 1917. So 2017, pardon me. 27. I'm a century off. Sorry. Till 2017. So now that's 3 years out. So I don't think you should be concerned with any financial impact on our budget for this next cycle.
Well, and that's why I'm asking these questions, sir.
I think, frankly, I don't think there'll be any financial impact on our budget for the next cycle, given the dates that we've been hearing lately.
And you're just so right that so much is coming over the wall. For example, I had understood that this entire project was going to be in the $1.5 billion range, and now we're talking $2 billion, and now we have a 3-year or 2-year extension. So these are the questions I'm trying to raise.
All right, we're trying to help too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Yeah, Peter, I still have some questions, Mr. Chairman. In your presentation, Scylla operators lost. My research shows that Scylla operates at quite a substantial profit.
What does?
Scylla.
No, it does not. When you look at the actual cost, and you look at depreciation, and you look at the actual cost, including their entire balance sheet, in fact shows they don't cover expenses. Cash flow is something else.
Okay. And
I'd be willing, certainly, Brian, to get that information to you.
yeah, sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. And one of your questions and issues, and it goes back, I think, to a business plan, is you talked about travel time and the comparison. And if I were traveling from Miami to Orlando, I suppose that might be a consideration for me of how much time it's going to drive, how much time it's going to take to fly, and and how much time it's going to take to take a train. But again, as a governing authority, I have to wonder why that is a concern for us if we're not giving them money, if we're not paying for the crossings. As long as this is privately funded, if their business model is flawed and people are going to look and say, no, I can drive there faster, and they're going to do that rather than take the train, I'm not sure why that's a concern for us as governing authorities.
Well, I said I'm talking from the information I was trying to provide and everything I've looked at. And part of questioning the business plan is, in fact, if this thing, for whatever reason, is not successful, that then there's going to be sunk costs that are not going to be recovered by the city.
Thank you, Mr.
What
Gorey.
cost wouldn't be recovered by the city?
Well, we have to I don't know, Monty can talk to what expenses would be. And when I say the city, we're talking about 130 road crossings. So I wanted to try to get, Vero Beach is one thing, but for the entire holistic system, the entire route, there is going to be expenses that are going to be sunk costs, potentially on upgrading those 130 signaling systems and putting in extra sidings so that the trains can pay. You have 2 tracks, and you have 2 trains that are passenger trains, and you have 20 freight trains coming through until Panama Canal opens. So there's going to be a lot of sunk money as I see it.
And that's another question that I have. The presenters often take and they concern themselves and try to concern us with the impact. In fact, the chairman has on numerous occasions said that, by the way, it's the freight, and yet they have a right, as of right now, today, without doing anything at all, they have a right to run as many freight trains up and down that track as they want.
I understand that.
And I'm not sure that I understand why, in consideration of the high-speed rail, the passenger rail, why we continue to try to tie this to the freight lines. I think the freight lines are a concern. I think that's something that the city should be concerned about.
Well, if 20 trains come through every hour, you effectively close down the city. It's a volume issue in terms.
If I might, to just piggyback off of some of what Mr. Hetty is saying, that you mentioned about the amount of money it might cost a taxpayer, I think is what you were referring
Right.
to. And my understanding from the meetings that we've had and the meetings I've had privately with All Aboard Florida's president and other meetings I've been invited to, this is a fully collateralized loan. And Florida East Coast and All Aboard Florida would be paying much of the improvement costs at the crossings, is the way we've understood from those folks what is going to take place. So, and I really think that the folks from All Aboard Florida would be happy to sit down and meet with you and explain how their project is planned and how the monies are going to be used.
Well, I certainly
what monies
I don't.
are coming from private funds as opposed
I'd
to
rather have
public.
them explain that at a public meeting so that there's a tape and a public record.
Well, I want to thank you, Penny, for that, because that's new information to me. I was going on, and as you said, this is happening in real time.
Right.
Every week there's another
There's
media
different-
release and article,
Sure.
and so. Much like the electric situation, it is changing rather. And I don't want to get into that, please.
Don't go.
But what I'm saying
Go
is,
there.
This is railroad.
on your second point, I'd be more than willing to work, but this commission has invested so much time and has so much information that I would certainly not want to duplicate anything you're doing and would rely upon you providing the information. And I will assure you that I will be working with Ken and the commission on any of these issues. But you're taking the lead. You're doing. I appreciate the work that all of you are doing. And what we're saying is this: although we keep talking Vero Beach, we really have to expand that to see what the impact is on the state of Florida and on the entire route, because it becomes somewhat different looking at which end of the telescope you're looking through.
We really appreciate you
Thank you
coming
very much.
in and
One
having
thing I'd like
comments.
to correct. You stated there were 20 freight trains a day going through Vero Beach. There's only 14 that are going through at this time.
Sorry. Again, the information, anything you can clarify, I had picked this up based upon where I read it. Maybe that was some years ago when the economy was uplifted. But I know that in the morning, between 7 and 9, there's at least 2, and between 5 and 6, there are another 2, and I don't count the ones at night and so forth. But I'm sorry to digress. I didn't mean to.
One last question, Peter. You note that the Scylla train from New York to Boston has 13 grade crossings. Where'd you get that number from?
I'll get it from you. It was from one of the government websites, and it listed them all. What happened, there was a major accident that had a number of fatalities, and so there was a significant, in the last several years, to eliminate grade crossings at grade. And that is where I got the information, and I will provide that to you.
Okay. I took the Scylla. I went up last month because I wanted to see for myself, and I took it and rode it and took a lot of pictures. And I can't tell you with any degree of certainty that there's more than 13. I can't tell you with any degree of certainty that the number's accurate or inaccurate. But I can tell you that my knee-jerk reaction is there was more than 13.
From to Boston?
Yeah.
They had a list of them, and I will get the list. I mean, that's what I just took off.
And the other thing that I found interesting in the crossings is that the crossings look no different than State Road 60. At one point during this commission meeting, we were presented with some pretty elaborate mechanical operations to close down, and we talked about closing all the lanes down. And I can tell you that on the Scylla line between Washington D.C. and Boston, that there's a load of crossings that don't have any special crossing mechanisms.
But how many towns, and I've taken the Metroliner, do you go bifurcating town after town after town on that trip? Now, all the metropolitan areas are insulated, but from New Carrollton to Baltimore, and from Baltimore to Wilmington to Philadelphia to Trenton, and so forth, for most of that route, they're either underground or they're tunneled. But I don't want to argue with you. I'll get the information, and if I stand corrected, I certainly would provide that to you, Brian.
Okay, we have people waiting patiently. Come right up, sir. You've been waiting patiently. Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record. Thank you, Mr. Goring.
Thank you for your time. I hope I didn't take up.
Thanks for the effort you put in, Peter. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You can have that, sure.
My name is Jeff Ream, and I live at 6570 Caicos Court, which is in Antilles. It's about 1,000 feet from the track. I will keep my presentation as brief as possible. I will be definitely under 4 minutes. However, I do need to ask a question. Where did you board the high-speed train when you rode to Boston?
When?
Where?
Oh,
What
in
station?
Boston.
So you were in okay, and where did you go?
I came all the way back to Florida on the train.
So you rode a Scylla from Boston through Washington, D.C.?
I took a Scylla from Boston to Penn Station, and then I took the Amtrak from Penn Station to Orlando.
Well, I would like to give you a copy of the Wikipedia definition of the Northeast Corridor, and I would also add that I lived in Mystic, Connecticut for a long number of years, and I'm familiar with the grade crossings in southern New England. This document says there are 11 and explains it in detail.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Now, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today, and I want to tell you why I believe that All Aboard Florida represents a serious public safety concern. This is necessary because in the last meeting there were some discussions about the commissioner having concluded, based on his ride on high-speed rail, that things were the same as down here, and that the sealed corridors were not sealed, and that there was no obvious difference. I will submit documentation on every point I make, and that is included in the package that I gave the Secretary. First of all, sealed corridor does not mean continuous barricaded track. It's an FRA term referring to specific safety crossing features, and that includes advanced warning devices, gates, barriers, commonly quad gates, and 9-inch high median barriers. It really doesn't deal with an issue of having an isolated corridor with fence all the way. I concluded from your comments about riding high-speed rail in Boston that you were probably on the local Boston routes, of which there are 394 miles of track in Boston. Those lines do not travel at speeds over 70 miles an hour, and they are not high speed. I'm quite amazed that you were aware of more than 11 crossings on the Acela line from Boston to Washington, because all the information that I have does not agree with that. And as a matter of fact, I went on Google Earth and actually looked at the crossings for a long part of that distance. I will also absolutely verify that there are 11 in southern New England in the county of New London, which is where I lived. And I will also tell you that a person went up there yesterday and literally counted them. I'm sorry I took a little extra time there. I want to give you some statistics on crossing fatalities in Florida. This data comes from Florida DOT. It's for the period of 2000 to 2010. The state had 2,867 miles of track. And in Florida, during that period, they experienced 173 fatalities. The FEC line, the freight line, running from Miami to Jacksonville, has 351 miles of track, which is 12% of the total of Florida, and has had 50 fatalities in that period, which is 29% of the total. So they're a little on the high end on achievement. Now, by comparison to Acela, let me tell you why I concluded they could be up to 92 times less safe. Now, I'm an engineer, and I like numbers. So I'll give you some numbers. The FEC track is 95% grade crossing. Acela, according to my count and my information and my experience, is 98% bridge crossings. Now, I have to give a number that differs from the previous gentleman, and I will substantiate that in a second. There are 353 crossings. They're somewhere between 346 and 353. It depends how the crossings are counted. But there are, according to the FRA, in the document that Fred, you're all aware of Frank Fry and his document that is well published, and he gives the numbers for crossings. And according to this document, there are 353. I went on Google Earth and counted all of the crossings between West Palm Beach, center of West Palm Beach, and Cocoa. And I can verify that for the northern section, his numbers are correct. So, the issue here, and I come from New England, and I'm not inherently experienced in having so many crossings. Everything up north, for the most part, in terms of at least significant roads, are bridged. So there aren't any wait times, and there isn't really any danger of accidents. Adding 32 trains across 353 crossings and 195 miles of urban cities and towns inherently triples the opportunity for crossing accidents. It's like buying lottery tickets, and if you're going to buy 32 times 353 crossings more, you're going to have a higher risk of an accident. Now, the FRA requested safety improvements that are defined in this document, and they were called sealed corridor, and they involve those quad gates and median dividers and other things. If All Aboard Florida incorporates fully the intent of the FRA inspection, both for the southern part that they did and for the northern part that they haven't done yet, then they would incorporate these improvements on 100 and 47 of those 353 crossings. We have not yet seen any written confirmation that AAF will, in fact, do that. But even when they do, those guidelines don't apply to the other 206 crossings in southern Florida. So there isn't going to be a substantial improvement unless voluntarily All Aboard Florida incorporates these features even in the zone that's under 80 miles an hour. It's not apparent that they will, and therefore there's a reasonable doubt that the incorporation of these safety features that All Aboard Florida may provide will actually provide a significant reduction in safety as opposed to an increase in frequency of accidents because of the number of train crossings. Now, to put those into numbers, if we consider each daily train crossing as a risk, just like buying a lottery ticket, with All Aboard Florida, the accident risk is 14 trains times 353 crossings, which is just about 5,000 a day. When they go to 46 trains, which is 32 plus 14, then the crossing rate will be just over 16,000. If you compare, and I'll just make that point, that's a difference in buying lottery tickets. If you compare this to the Acela lack of crossings, which we obviously have some disagreement on, but which I provided some information, they have 456 miles of track, and only 15 miles of that track has those 11 crossings. They pass 16 trains per day through that area where those crossings exist. Acela has experienced only one crossing accident with 3 fatalities in a total of their history, which happens to be about 14 and a half years. So Acela has had one accident with 3 fatalities. Now, Acela's accident risk is 16 trains times 11 crossings, or 176 crossings a day. Comparison of now I'm going to give you a specific comparison of 15 years of accidents between the Florida East Coast Freight and Acela. This data comes directly from the FRA database. You can go in there on a computer and you can literally see every accident that happened, and you can even call up the accident report. FEC has had, well, let me start back again. Comparison of 15 years of accidents between FEC and Acela reveals that they had 3 crossing deaths on Acela and 71 on FEC. So FEC has 24 times greater fatality rate than Acela before adding 32 trains. That's just how it is today.
Why do you
over
think that
15
is?
years. Pardon me?
Why do you think that is?
Because the number of crossings. Up
Because of the
north,
grade crossings?
they don't have crossings. They have bridges. Down here, you guys have crossings every half mile. And in South Florida, it's amazing to me what's going to happen down there. And I'll close with a statement on that. But the fact is, 3 for Acela and 71 for FEC over a period of 14 and a half to 15 years. Now, if you look at total crossing events, because I just talked about fatalities, crossing events, the score is 3 for Acela and 307 for FEC. So FEC is 100 times worse today without adding any more trains than Acela. If we accept as a reasonable measure of safety risk the ratio of the number of crossings per day between what All Aboard Florida will be and what Acela is, that comes out to be the fact that All Aboard Florida will be 92 times higher in crossing opportunities for accidents than Acela. Now, in South Florida, I'm just absolutely amazed because, as far as I have read, there are plans, a lot of plans down there to increase commuter rail using the FEC line, the coastal route, they call it. All Aboard Florida has expressed interest in adding 32 more trains on top of the 32 express trains as commuter service between Palm Beach and Miami. So they're going to have maybe 64 all-aboard Florida trains. And in addition, the Tri-Rail has expressed an interest in constructing the Coastal Link and they run 50 a day, and I don't know how many they'd want to continue to run up, but they'd like to run between Palm Beach and Jupiter on the Coastal Link using the FEC track. So they're going to have 100 trains a day down there on their 206 crossings. And I just don't understand it. But, my position is simple. We already have a history record, and it's not pristine. It's a lot more than up north and a lot more than Acela. And what we should be doing is trying to get in crossing safety improvements rather than adding yet more trains on top of what we have today. I have given you all kinds of backup data on all these statistics in the package. And I've also given you, for information, the federal definitions of high-speed rail and the federal definitions of sealed corridor. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I know that some of these numbers can always be debated, but these are the documents that I got them from.
We have a question from our vice chair.
Yes, Jeff, I happen to be born and raised in New England, and I've spent 30 years working in government to eliminate grade crossings.
Yes, sir.
We spent millions and millions of dollars every year with a grade crossing elimination program. It would be nice if Florida had done something like that over the last 40 years, but they didn't. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, I think this is a very good presentation. I would hope you would submit it when we have the environmental impact statement. They're going to be looking for written submissions from individuals on that. So if you would,
yes,
that would be a good thing to submit from you rather than from us, because
yes, sir.
It's a variety of people they're looking for. When we first started this process, my immediate was, let's elevate the thing. And you could elevate a passenger train without too much of a problem. It's hard to elevate freight.
Money, yeah.
That much more money for it because the weight and everything else is not that great. But in fact, you're running freight on the same line creates a significant problem. The issue, one thing, it's looking at rail fatalities is always interesting. Whenever a small airplane crashes, it's national news. Whenever a train accident happens, it's national news. How many people get killed on our highways every day? It's not national news because it's so frequent. People just don't pay attention. So in reality, when we built I-95, we created a corridor that a lot of people die on. And so when you look at safety, my concern is safety. I'm asking this question. As an engineer, one of the things I would be advocating would be to slow the train down when it goes through populated areas. Right now, they're talking about going at 110 miles an hour, which qualifies as high-speed rail. But if you limited it to 60 miles an hour, which is slightly over what the freight travels at, going through urban areas, do you think that would have a positive impact on increasing safety or decreasing the negative impact on safety?
Well, let me respond two ways. First, Acela does slow down through most populated areas. Right. So in fact,
well, we've been told this train's going to go through 110 miles an hour. So.
They don't go 110 miles an hour through.
They don't go 110 miles an hour.
Through London County or through Connecticut.
Right, I know.
They do top out at about 125 in a very local area in Connecticut, but it isn't very far. And they don't run anywhere between New Haven and New York at over 69 or 70 miles an hour. They'd only run up to 110 and then up to 125 and beyond that for 28 miles.
Right. So would you think that an impact on safety would be positive if we advocated slowing the train down at least as it goes through urban area?
Well, the problem is they can't slow it down and make their train do it for 3 hours.
I understand that, but I'm just saying when the federal government looking at it from a safety standpoint, when you provide this kind of data, and if speed is a major component of the safety, then it would seem to me that looking at speed as a component, is there more accidents when the train's going faster or when the train's going slower?
FRA has stated, and there's research that has stated that the accident rate does not increase with speed.
It does not.
It does not.
So you're saying speed is not a safety issue?
Speed is not the big factor.
Not the big factor.
There is research, FRA, and a couple other places I've seen where they discount speed as a significant accident issue. However, they qualify it in a couple of regards. First is when two trains cross, like you gentlemen had discussed here, that you might have two trains passing here in Aviation Boulevard. Well, if they're traveling at 110 miles an hour, that's a closing speed of 220.
Right.
And the other issue with that is those kinds of crossings, double crossings, double tracks, are more dangerous than single track because they're coming from different directions.
So the fact that we are going to be in the crossing zone would argue more for slowing the trains down than just slowing
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
All right. So the fact that we are in the crossing zone mitigates and says we should be advocating for much slower trains
Yes,
going
sir.
through here. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ream.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the general public? And actually, Vero Beach will actually be in, I was thinking about that with the trains going past one another, we'll actually be in the crosshairs. And just before this speaker begins, your 110 through Vero Beach in our county, people are very concerned with that speed. Now, that's the speed that All Aboard Florida said that it would be doing through here. Now, I was thinking a few weeks ago, if they lose time elsewhere where they'll have to probably make up time, they can actually go faster, because when you look at when they head into Cocoa, they're going to be going faster than the 110. There is nothing on the books, there is nothing in writing that they cannot go through Vero Beach faster as they see fit. So they can do right now pretty much what the tracks will carry, and I want the general public to be aware of that. It could be faster at different times. We don't know, because there's nothing in writing that says they're not going to do it, and there's nothing in writing that prohibits them from doing it.
Isn't there an existing speed limit of 79?
Excuse me?
Right now? Isn't there an existing speed limit of 79? Right now?
Well, that's the...
Okay.
But, okay, go ahead, ma'am. I don't want to take more of your time.
Thank you. My name is Alice Johnson. I live at 5470 East Harbor Village Drive, Vero Beach. And I'm speaking to you today as a citizen and as treasurer of the Indian River County Taxpayers Association. I want to start in deference to those of you who like trains and they're in favor of this train by agreeing trains are fun. I rode Eurail all over Europe when I was in college. I took the bullet train from Tokyo to Osaka in the 1980s. I went overnight from Moscow to St. Petersburg, and they are great. Then, when I heard that maybe we'd get trains here, maybe in Vero Beach, from here to Palm Beach, here's where it breaks down. I knew from research that you have to charge between 50 cents and $1 per mile to go anywhere. So I said to my husband, wow, won't that be fun? Get on the train, go down to Palm Beach for a day. Well, that's going to be $90 to $180 round trip. But what happens when I get to Palm Beach? I got to get in a cab to get to shopping, to get to the Breakers, to get to Worth Avenue. Now we're up to about $220 just for my travel. I don't have enough money to buy a new top at the stores. I don't have enough money to buy lunch at the Breakers. And that's why people won't ride this train, because it's very expensive and only businessmen can afford it. And if businessmen are going to take it, they are going to want it to be reliable. Why did the fun train fail? Because it shared tracks with freight, and the two screw up each other. They make both unreliable and not dependable, and they cut the market for both. So the businessmen aren't going to like it. The tourists certainly aren't going to pay $1,200 to take their family for a side trip to Disneyland or a side trip to Miami. It's just not going to work. And because it's not going to work, the $1.5 billion federal dollars that go to the loan are probably going to be defaulted on. The collateral? What is the collateral? The high-speed trains, the rolling stock? What are we going to do with that? What is the collateral? Okay, so it just doesn't work. The idea that they're going to renovate these tracks and they're suddenly going to be okay for high speed, where I come from, we call that putting lipstick on a pig. This is 100-year-old freight tracks. You cannot just do a little bit of stuff and have them run the bullet train, have them run Paris to Lyon. And by the way, one more thing, the Madrid to Barcelona train does not make money. It's only in France and in Japan, the only two high-speed rails in the world. that make money. So please, don't spend Vero Beach's money to upgrade crossings, to do anything, until you see that this train actually works. Because we will spend millions of dollars, the thing will go out of business, and we've got nothing to show for it. That's my message. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Heading.
just for the record, ma'am, just for the record, the collateral security package that All Aboard Florida is offering is considerably more than just rolling stock. There's lots of real estate, high-priced real estate in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm. And, yeah.
Come right up, sir.
Thank you. My name is Joseph Cafanti, and I live at 441 Holly Road. I want to address the deaths at first. A couple months ago, if you remember, I told you that there were 260 deaths, pedestrian deaths in the state of Florida in a 6-year period from 2004 to 2010 or 2000, whatever it was. That doesn't compare to what the gentleman, Mr. Reed, I think his name is, said. And I'm not opposing his data. I'm questioning whether or not they're pedestrian deaths or vehicular accidents. And would you allow him to come up here and...
He left.
Oh, he did. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
Lizzie,
well, I can't...
Would you like
Pardon?
the handout?
Well, I can't. I'm not going to take
Okay.
the time to read it now. I know what he said. That they were significantly different than what I read in I guess it's the Palm Beach Post. Do any of you remember me telling?
Yes,
I did.
yes, and I think the difference comes from the fact that his data only dealt with road crossings, and the data in the other area kind of all along people who were trespassing on the tracks, other than where the railroad
Any
crossings
place,
were.
I would imagine.
Anyway,
But
exactly.
they said
And that would be the
pedestrian
difference
deaths.
in the numbers as you're looking.
Okay, all right. So that
It
makes
would
sense.
contribute. I don't know if it's a total difference, but I think it would contribute to the difference.
I had the opportunity to talk to a professional conductor in the New Jersey transit system, and I'm going to address the schedule here, the timing of the trains, etc. This gentleman was a professional. He told me, this is a serious issue, so I'm not trying to take a lot of time up, but I'm going to tell you some of the things that I know. He told me that his job was to get people to work on time and to get them home on time safely on a daily basis. And I think he was serious about that. He told me, now this is the New Jersey transit system, which is a lot more sophisticated than anything down here in Florida. He told me that 96% of the trains, the New Jersey transit trains, are within 4 minutes of schedule. 96% are within 4 minutes of schedule. That means they could be a minute off, a minute here, a minute there. Now to the point, this notion that anybody could pinpoint where these two trains are going to cross is totally ludicrous. And if somebody comes out and gives you that information and says something that's it can't possibly be, then you have to suspect anything else that they might have to say. I would. If somebody lies to me once, I have to make, you know the rest. Okay? That can't happen unless that somehow All Aboard Florida can dig Mussolini up from his grave or wherever he is and get him to come to Florida as ghost or whatever to run the trains on time. And if you don't know to what I refer, then check your history. The collateralization is interesting. I just heard Mr. Hetty say something about who is putting up what. Well, who owns the property? to whom is the loan going to?
I did not check public records to see who owned the property, but I asked the question, what's the collateral? And the answer I got from All Aboard Florida was that it was the rolling stock, but there was a list of items, including downtown real estate in Miami, Palm Beach County, and Broward County, that was part of the collateral security package. And again, I don't have the whole list, but to put out there that the only collateral was the rolling stock is just the wrong impression to give the public.
Okay, I would like to see to whom the loan is extended.
Legitimate question.
Pardon?
Legitimate question.
And nobody seems to want to come up with that answer either. This has been, by the way, well, I'll save that comment for later, maybe. A congested area, they talked about the Northeast being a congested area. I happen to come from the most densely populated area of the most densely populated state. That's northeastern New Jersey. And there is, except for rush hour, more congestion, and I drive around Bergen County frequently, there's more congestion right here in Indian River County than there is in and around Bergen County. Now, you may find that hard to believe, but I can get from point A to point B, 10 miles, 12 miles, much faster any place up there than I can down here. And I can't, and that's it. Because of the way that the lights are set up, the lack of whatever, no jug handles, for instance, that's not the issue. The bottom line is this area is much more congested than, except for rush hour, than much of North Jersey, which is much more densely populated. Let's see here. I'm sorry I have to read my notes here. Oh yeah, this is a great one. 4%, somebody said that they want to capture 4% of the traffic between Orlando and Miami. And they say that that's 12,000, yeah, 12,000 people a day. 4% of X amount of people is 12,000. You know how many people that is? It looks like it's 1.2 million people. Somebody's really suggesting, is that possible? Excuse me. Sorry, I misspoke. 300,000. Is it possible that 300,000 people? I don't know. But is it possible that 300,000 people a day travel between Miami and Orlando? I find that hard to believe. I don't know, but I mean, I don't go from Miami to. I avoid both cities like the plague. Okay.
What we've been told is that there's 50 million trips per year between Miami and Orlando. But I just did a calculation based on your 300,000, et cetera, per day, and it comes to over 90 million. So you're right. Your calculations would show that 4% is in question. I think we need to, get more information from him.
I did that without a slide rule.
You're very good. You're very good, sir.
But
I see the advocates.
I'm in a good mood because this isn't a city council, and you people are a little bit more friendly. So you get. I wanted to say one thing. I think that Mr. Hetty is right in that there's not a heck of a lot we can do about stopping this. What I think that the public can do, myself included, is to ask you not to support it in any way, shape, or form. Because I don't think it's in the best interest of the city of Vero Beach to have these trains, and I use the trains all the time in the Northeast and going from Florida to Newark, New Jersey, and I don't think there's anybody in the room would want to go to Newark, New Jersey. That's the deal. And by the way, I have a degree in engineering too, and there is, and not to disparage Mr. Reed, and I fully respect his information and the work he did and the computations he made. But when somebody asked me to tell the difference between an elephant and a canary, I don't look for a scale and a micrometer to take measurements. Intuitively, I know where it's going, what's going on. I know which is which without... Let me just say this. The reason why I said that is I look at other features, and I told you before, I think all of you were here before. I told you who these people are that are in back of this. And the bottom line is, I told you this, they're on the 46th floor of 6th Avenue and 54th Street. I misspoke one time. I told you we're on 56th Street, but they're on 54th Street. Now I'm going to offer my opinion. I think this is a fraud in the making. I don't see how this is possible. Now, this is the elephant canary decision that I'm making. I think there's no way in blazes that this is going to work. And I say that with an engineering background, with a little familiarity with efficiency. It just isn't going to work. And somebody's here with their tin cup out with a tin cup in their hand, pushing it in the taxpayers' faces, and the general public of the entire United States. That's my opinion. I think this is a fraud in the making. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Garfani, I don't want to be added to your list as your T-shirt says. But
geez, you couldn't. I didn't think you could read that.
No, we can read it. We can read it.
I'm sorry. This is a work shirt, and I took a nap and woke up and didn't have time to change it. I'm sorry. Right. So I don't even know what it says. I know it's not nice.
But anyway, and taking a chance that I don't want to be added to that list. I enjoyed your comments on the calculation of where the trains would cross. I don't think that was provided to us on a basis if the trains left on time and traveled at the speeds projected, that's where they would cross. So it probably is a range which may run a 10 or 15 mile period, where the trains would probably cross most of the time within that period. And all we're talking about is, are we in that zone that many of the trains may cross as they're going through? And that's in the argument that is a safety issue. Therefore, if they're crossing in our area and will cross most of the time around here, then we should be concerned about that. That's why that was. So I understand what your comments were, and I don't think we were taking it as they're all going to cross at Aviation Boulevard.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Do you know how many spots, the points that the trains are going to cross throughout the entire trip?
Well, they're going to cross once each train going north and south, but there's going to be 5 or 6 trains on the track at any given time, coming each way.
Let me answer the question. Yeah. 5 times. 5 times. There's going to be 5 times
along that route.
5 points, and they're going to vary depending on, as you said, the trains leaving on time. And one little glitch or something is going to throw them off. And I assure you, they're not going to operate as efficiently as the New Jersey Transit trains. And by the way, the conductor all told me this, which I don't know if it's true or not, because I don't know. I didn't know him. He said to me that the railroad people down here are headhunting up there to get people to come down. Now, they're going to have a hard time doing that unless they're ready to retire. Good day.
Thank you very much, sir.
And just for the record, Mr. Gafanti, I think that I've probably qualified for your T-shirt at least 100 times over the last 20 years.
Come right up, ma'am. Come on up. Come on up, please. Please state your name and address for the record when you get to the podium.
Twice. It's funny.
Good afternoon.
Good
Melinda
afternoon.
Meikle, 1612 West Camino del Rio. I come with a prepared speech, and then I hear so many things going on that I'm taking notes, and I can't even read what I wrote. But when you talk, keep hearing people say They own the land. They can do anything they want. You know, we live in a highly regulated country. You know, we own our real estate. Commercial people have as many obligations to keeping the community, you know, the atmosphere around them and health and security and all that stuff in the environment. So I don't know if that's true. Now, when they go for a federal loan, for example, it puts it on a different level because then we become the stakeholders should it not work out. So that's why we're all concerned about all the statistics we're hearing. What I'm about to say, are our elected officials listening to us? That is, the people that believe we should have the railroad moved out west. Seems like a really good idea for a lot of reasons. Congressman Jeff Denham of California is working for us on a federal level. He stopped federal financing in 2011 for high-speed rail. Why? Because of the inconsistent delays, missed deadlines, and shortcuts. And he will continue opposing high-speed rail until the train proves that it will not be running on subsidies. That's a big issue, I think, for everybody, those subsidies. The California judge ruled against it because they had a $68 billion funding plan that they had to redo. He accused the high-speed rail of failing to identify funding sources. He accused high-speed rail of not having an environmental clearance in place. The GAO has opposed, this is California, but it's very similar to what's going to happen here. They're 5 years ahead of us. The GAO has provided, did not provide a complete set of assumptions. High-speed rail does not trace final cost estimates to source documentation, does not verify how low cost components such as stations and trains were calculated. By the way, I think the trains are owned by GE, which is a division of Fortress, if that's their collateral. They did not conduct a risk and uncertainty analysis to determine the likelihood that estimates would be met. It's really not a done deal. There are others fighting against the high-speed rail and have won. Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama and Chairman Paul Ryan of Wisconsin. They were successful in stopping $6.9 billion California Express West due to the $5 billion that was going to be on the backs of the American taxpayers through an FRA loan. Whether there's any money there or not, who knows? Their concerns are about the RIF loan, that a RIF is a different kind of loan. It's a loan as not a guaranteed program. Little or no federal tax dollars are usually provided to the project. Instead, a RIF loan would involve simply transferring of billions of dollars, much or all, not to be repaid, placing a RIF financing for high-speed rail on the backs of taxpayers one more time. The RIF California loan request was the highest in U.S. history. The highest given a RIF loan is $563 million. So is there ample money there for All Aboard Florida? I don't know what their plans are along those lines. So Ryan and Sessions express, we are deeply troubled by the prospects of subsidizing another costly, wasteful, and risky high-speed rail project, particularly when our nation is facing a debt crisis that threatens the well-being of the current and future generations of Americans. The Department of Transportation agreed. They turned down the Express loan in July of 2013 due to significant uncertainties surrounding the project. The Congressional Research Department also has expressed their concerns. High-risk taxpayer projects for high-speed rail around the world have not earned enough revenue to cover both construction and operating costs, and typically governments will be paying for both. Now, I went to which I put in my little packet, one of the concerns I'd like to address for the environmental impact statement of the sound of the horns. And on when Nathan Airchime is one of the two top whistle horn manufacturers that are recommended by the FRA. And they've got these warnings on there about loudness. Safety is our priority. However, nobody should be closer than 100 feet. Proper hearing protection must be worn when using this air horn. Hearing loss or permanent damage may result from unsafe use. Never operate this product close to pedestrians. So we see coming through this county how many horns are beeping. I was calculating something like if you go along those 353 crossings, 45,000 blasts a day. And, and it's going to get worse if they add more freight trains to it. So according to the engineer at Nathan Airchime, most passenger and freight trains have horns placed on the front of the lead train, on top or down on the front near the tracks, but both facing backwards and outwards and sounds at 96 to 110 decibels for trains at any speeds in the United States. That's the FRA blanket requirements. So we're talking decimals. What does that mean, 96 to 110 decibels? Well, you can take a, okay, one other thing the engineering department said there at their company, depending on the length of the train, horns are also placed every 3 cars. And in some cases, some have the horns facing out on the front and facing backwards as the train moves down the tracks. I mean, they're trying to warn people. So the noise impact is a highly serious concern. And I submitted a plan there outlined in enforcing noise ordinances in Florida, which I gave to, passed over to Tammy. Appendix B shows the maximum permissible sound levels at 65 decibels for residential, commercial, and industrial. However, since the FRA requires high-speed trains to blast at 96 to 110 decibels, let's just figure out that comparison. From a vacuum cleaner is 70 decibels, and a riveting machine is 110 decibels. As per the specs, this is a dramatic, it's disproportional. It goes up it just doesn't multiply and go up double and whatever. It goes up 16 times louder than the average threshold for pain for an average person. So you got to worry about those lawsuits and whatever, people living or stopping, waiting for the train to go by. Noise is a big issue. I checked the City Vero ordinance claims, and it's against loud noise. It's unlawful because it disturbs the peace and the quiet. However, they have exempted signal warnings, so it's not going to cover these 4,000 blasts a day at minimum. So this liability alone, wouldn't all aboard Florida really be convinced to move west? Seems to me a lot better situation. And with all due respect, we ask our elected representatives to save our treasure coast. But I also wanted to ask, which I never have understood, the sweet spot for all aboard Florida is the 3 hours to get, from Miami to Orlando. I assume that might have to do with getting a high-speed rail loan, because you have to be high-speed in order to get that loan. There you go. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else from the general public would like to come up? Yes, sir. Come up and state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Donald Hood. I live at 440th Court Southwest here in Vero Beach. I was going to read my presentation, but I think for time purposes, I'll skip through it and abbreviate it. I have given it to Ms. Falk, so it is there. I wanted to make a presentation tonight in a totally different vein, because when you come to these meetings, whether it's the Indian River Council or Vero Beach or even this committee, there's an awful lot of negativity coming up from the different people. And I get disturbed by some of this because, well, let me backtrack for a second. I used to work for the Navy, and we would put in approvals for computer systems in the early days. The Navy was spending so much money, they clamped down and said, we're going to have an admiral review your request for a computer system to see whether or not that's a viable thing. And the first 2 or 3 plans that we submitted were turned down. And finally, the admiral contacted our department and said, listen, I don't know anything about computers. I do know something about English, and I know something about language. And when you approach me and you have misspellings or glaring errors in your paperwork, denied. And what I see in a lot of in fact, every one of the presentations, there's always some little misstep or misquote that had this been a debate with a subject matter expert, these people would be crawling. There's always something wrong. For example, somebody mentioned something about the 100-year-old tracks. I'm sorry, the right-of-way is over 100 years old. The tracks are not very old at all. They keep constantly replacing them. If you go down by Airport Boulevard, you'll see a stack of replacement concrete ties that have been pulled out as a consistent upgrade. And funny, no one mentions that the Florida East Coast Railway has been a model for the rest of the world. A lot of people have come down to Florida to see how the FEC did it because they were leaders in that technology. One of the very first rail lines in the entire country to go to concrete ties, which is safer, was FEC. So they've always been a safety-minded railroad. So what concerns me is that all of the misinformation that the public is, the amateurish attempts to be all of a sudden a subject matter expert. The research is, they've done some research, but they haven't done enough to be credible in my book. There's always some little gotcha in there that keeps me from trusting them. So I'm concerned about that as a public citizen, that so much baloney is out there that doesn't get a chance to have a subject matter expert debate it with them and really put it away once and for all. So at that light, I'd like to give you something you've probably never heard before. One of the most common complaints about the high-speed rail in this county is, oh, it won't do us any good whatsoever. I'm sorry, yes it will. It may not be what we want it to be, but we're going to get some. If they put it in, there will be some tangibles if they don't stop in Vero Beach. If we can somehow talk them into stopping in Indian River County or Vero Beach, there'll be a lot of them. So that's what I want to quickly get over and across today. Number one, how many people have had a hard time getting to the airport, either Orlando or Fort Lauderdale? I choose Orlando just because the traffic is better than trying to go to Fort Lauderdale. But still, there was one time I had to take a limousine home from Fort Lauderdale because I could not get a rental car. People travel into these airports, and there's no public access to a rapid airporter that could get you to and from the airport. When I lived in Washington State, it cost us $30 to go 90 miles in about 35 minutes, more than 35 minutes, an hour and 35 minutes to get to SeaTac Airport. Wonderful. And I can see having access to a station in Indian River County is providing the same kind of service to the residents of this county. Come on, people, there are 15 good reasons why these trains can actually benefit this county. And no one's coming forth and saying anything about it, but that's number one. Here's one that maybe not as many people would take advantage of, but it's there. Access to cruise ships. You want to take a vacation from Vero? I'll tell you what, hopping to the FEC down to Miami Terminal and the few hundred yards to get to a cruise ship sounds good to me. Last time I was there, it was armed robbery in the parking lot, and that was by the parking attendants. And you leave your car there for a week, who knows what's going to happen. So access to cruise ships, although it's not a world changer, it's definitely a possibility. How about this one? Access to sporting events. You want to go down to see the Heat in the playoffs? Hop a train? How about that? Or to Orlando or anywhere else in the state where they're having games of interest to people. I sure wouldn't want to drive down to Miami to go to Heat's games and get stuck in the traffic down there. Now let's take that in reverse. What do we have in Indian River County that might be of value to somebody else? How about historic Dodgertown and their attempts to bring in sporting events here? Ta-da, we got a station here, we can get people to stop here. No one said a word about that. But that is a possibility, and it's worth looking into. How about, if sports aren't into your thing, or cruise ships, how about cultural events? Same kind of thing. You can take the train down to a cultural event in Miami or Orlando or St. Peter's or Palm Beach or some of the other areas. And how about increased accessibility to Vero Beach? What are you talking about? Who wants to? What I'm talking about is there are people who can't fly anymore or are afraid to fly, people who do want to come here. I can give several examples. And there's also people who can't get here any other way, either by car or train is their only solution. I can't fly anymore. I have a banged up leg because a surgeon screwed me up here in Indian River County, so I cannot fly anymore. I would love to be able to hop a train to go to New York City and take Cunard to Europe. Can't do it right now. And the next one was my wife's idea. I'm not real keen on this one, but I told her I'd bring it up anyway. And that's access to shopping. And somebody's already said, oh, that's just not a profitable thing. I think it can be. By the way, the rate from Vero Beach back in the 60s to Palm Beach was about $1. Now today things are roughly 10 to 11 times more expensive than they were, but it would be nice if we could get a ticket to Palm Beach for $11. But it's still going to be a lot less hassle than taking your car. Anybody driven in Palm Beach lately? My gosh, I'd just rather not go there. The next one is one that could benefit the city of Vero Beach and the county in a big way. There are experts trying to bring back commercial air to Vero Beach, into the airport. And it seems to me, with a railroad 100 yards from the airport, that would be in both of their best interests. One of the big selling points for all aboard Florida has been its proximity to A, airports, or B, cruise ship terminals, or C, both. And just about every one of the stops is located around that. Now, if Vero had commercial air in and out of here, I think that would be of interest. All right, the next one is increased tourism. That's kind of a stretch because right now, we're just not getting the kind of turnover that we should. During the summer months, we don't have anything. If we had the stops here, we could probably bring more people in during the summer.
I'll enter at that point and
Sure.
say the summer months no longer are the shoulder season like they used to be.
Yeah.
And in fact, the hotels are already reporting that they're booking through the fall at rates higher than average. Last year's summer months were increased, in some cases, 2 digits, 2 percentage points, to like 10, anywhere from 10 to 18%. So the summer, if you haven't traveled around within the community on any given night during the summer, it's quite a bit different than it was 5 or even 10 years ago.
Well, if that's the case, and I believe you're correct, then the increased tourism would still be a benefit.
Sure.
You could get here with the train as opposed to...
And for the record, Ms. Chandler, tell the folks out there that may not know who you are and where you pulled those numbers from.
Oh, I'm the president of the chamber, and we are the designated agency as the Conference and Visitors Bureau in the county.
Yes, that's Indian River County Chamber. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. Another one that's been mentioned many times by FEC themselves, and that is attending business meetings. Obviously, that's one of the 2 prongs of their approach. It's either tourism via the cruise ships or attending business meetings in the cities where you can cut some of that god-awful travel time on I-95 down to a manageable level. You can even do some work while you're on the train as opposed to trying to do it in your car. That's always going to be there. Another possibility, and this one I'm going to give credit to my wife again, but I thought it was brilliant, is we could already use some resources in existence in this county for a station. Chances are you folks passed within 2 blocks of it tonight on the way to the meeting. That old power plant right on the tracks, excellent parking, vacant building, City of Vero Beach is involved with that. Talk about a station. There you are, ready-made. So the next one on my list is going to be controversial, and it's kind of flies in the face of some of the things that are said tonight, but please hear me out, and that's increased safety. If nothing else was ever done in regards to all aboard Florida stopping in Indian River County, I think we could all benefit by the increased safety of having these crossings upgraded. If they do what they're supposed to say that they're going to do, there's an automatic increase in safety. Now, safety takes two prongs here, and quite often they're confused by the general public when they talk about them. The first is the requirements by the FRA to actually make a safe crossing. The second, safety recommendations, which are optional according to the FRA, is the safety requirements that go in to cut the noise. I'd say this county really needs to do that just to make the crossing safer, period. I ran across a video on the internet that it's really quite impressive. It's taken from the cab of FEC diesel, and it's approaching Roseland. And you see about 1 minute of the train moving along a corridor with nothing but trees. And all of a sudden, for 2 seconds, you see an intersection. I went back and looked at that intersection. I'll tell you what, folks, that thing needs to be fixed one way or the other, or someone's going to die there sooner or later, whether there's high-speed trains or not. So to me, if the FEC, if the all-aboard Florida thing comes through and never stops at Vero Beach, the chance of increasing the safety should be of paramount importance. I mean, what's this all about? Do you care more about the dollars, or do you care more about the lives of the people at stake here? We need to fix that. The next one is, again, a little bit controversial. If you're on this train and you're coming up from Miami Beach and you pass through Vero Beach at 110 miles an hour, if you get much of a look, what you're going to see is the backside of Commerce Avenue. Now, to me, that doesn't exactly match the posters for Disney World. You know, you wouldn't want to stop there, but it is an opportunity for Vero Beach, anyway, to reinvent itself and to clean that area up and do something with it. Lots of cities have embraced chances to make a model community or a business structure, business environment close to the railroad tracks, close to shipping. You know, it is an opportunity. The next one is more jobs. Okay, we hit that one too. However, what I heard tonight was people talking about railroad jobs. I'm not talking about railroad jobs. I mean, there probably won't be that many. Well, what about the jobs in Vero Beach? If you can get them to stop here, there will be more jobs. There was a young man that's attending one of the local colleges who had an editorial in the paper not long ago, Logan Smith, and talked about his friends are dying for the trains to stop in the summertime so they can at least have some summertime jobs to help them with their educations. There'll be other things too, especially if we do have that terminal here, people stopping, there will be other jobs in this county like you wouldn't believe. Number 14 on my list is one I mentioned at the last meeting, and that's national defense. A lot of people would poo-poo that one, but it is an intangible. You can't say it doesn't exist, and that's for national defense. The Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Aviation Administration, and the Federal Railway Administration are all in cahoots with the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense is heavily involved in all this for military purposes. They own the federal highway systems, for instance. That's Department of Defense. Federal Highway Administration administers it. The Department of Defense owns it. There's some precedences. In the Civil War, the federal government took over the railroads, and that made quite a difference. The whole world watched that as it made a huge difference in the fighting of the Civil War and the ultimate victory, whatever side you're for. It still influenced it. During World War I, the FEC itself was taken over by the Army and run by the Army for that amount of time. And by the way, the Army left it in better condition than they found it, which is not something you would expect. But even though it seems like we live in safe times, you never know a national emergency. When the National Guard has to be mobilized, the trains can be of use there. Lastly, I put this one on the list. I was impressed. I hadn't thought of this one, and I got this from this very council at the last meeting, and that is to get the traffic to slow down in downtown Vero Beach. That's not so far-fetched. I think it will help, and it definitely should be mentioned. It should be on the list. So we can get the politicians and the business leaders and concerned citizens involved in all this. Maybe we can present a common face to the FEC that they'll listen to us. All right, we need to accept the fact that what we're in right now, what all this is about, is phase one of the FEC project. Too many people lose sight of the fact that this is not the end. Right? It's the beginning, and if they're successful, and they have spent how many hundreds of thousands of dollars on professional analysts to figure out this is going to work or not, more than maybe one individual with a slide rule, all right, they think it's going to work. And if it does, successful, do you think they're going to stop there? I don't think so. So if there is a phase two, there will be more stops in Vero and on the Treasure Coast. And if we can't stop this negativism that's coming out of the media right now and citizens that are doing half the research but not all of it, Indian River County is going to be on the outside looking in, because the most logical spot for a terminal in this station, in this county, this Treasure Coast, is not in Vero Beach. It's in Fort Pierce. I don't want to leave my car there, do you? But the FEC owns property there. They have a major marshaling yard there, which is what they also have in Miami and Cocoa Beach, and will have in Orlando and have in Palm Beach. So all we can do is present this face of negativism that's rampant in this county. Will destroy any chance we have of ever talking the FEC into stopping here. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you, and I hope I've given you some thoughts on a different perspective instead of all the rampant negativism that we normally hear.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, Donald, first of all, thank you. And I would agree that there's a tremendous amount of negative energy, and it's not all negative. And I think that if All Aboard Florida had to put me in some category, they'd put me in a category of a harsh critic. But I would agree with you that some of the misinformation and the inaccurate information and the exaggerations that are being used by the critics are nothing more than an effort to try to kill. Yes. And I'd just like to hear the truth, whatever that truth might be. I'd like to hear the truth, and it's one of the reasons why I try to make an effort to talk to the citizens that present, or the officials from other governing agencies or from All Aboard Florida. Right. And I think that the openly hostile attack against All Aboard Florida by the county is just wrong. We're spending $138,000 of our tax dollars. They talk about concerns about tax dollars and what All Aboard Florida is going to cost us. Well, it's costing us $138,000 right now because the county commission is openly hostile, and they're against it. But they were before they were against it. And the power plant has a couple of other things. They also have 1,000 feet of track without a crossing, right, which is a requirement for a stop. So you're right. Power plant could be beneficial in that regard if Vero Beach were to be considered for a stop. But I think if you're looking at a logical stop between Orlando and West Palm, maybe the logical spot would be Melbourne because of the international airport there. And it's tying the different international airports together. But, again, that's part of the feasibility study and the financial papers that All Aboard Florida has put together that I haven't seen. And not to be callous, but if it's a question of dollars and lives, that was a question that
Yes.
that you had. Well, unfortunately, I think if it's a question of dollars and lives, it comes down for dollars. I don't think it should, but I think
agree.
that's where the decisions usually wind up falling.
I agree.
And thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, and one other thing. You said this is not the end, it's the beginning. That's a concern of many people.
Yes.
It isn't the end, that this is really the beginning. And, they think that, or they present that a train coming into Vero Beach is the beginning of the end of a small community, and that we're going to be nothing but high rises. And I don't buy into that theory at all. Not in the least.
What I meant by the beginning is that if the FEC or All Aboard Florida is successful, and I believe they will be,
I hope they are.
Yeah, if they are, they're. It's like McDonald's. McDonald's didn't build 4 restaurants and say, okay, we're going to stop with 4 because they're successful. You go on and see what else you can do with it to try to garner back some of that investment. One of the things that people lose sight of, too, is that, they've got to meet this 3-hour criteria that they have from Miami to Orlando. But they have 16 trains. Isn't there a possibility that one of those trains doesn't have to meet that 3-hour and can still pick us up and get us to where we need to go? I don't care if it's 5 hours or 6 hours, if it's going to make it easier for me to get from point A to point B. And I think there's a lot of other people feel that way, too. I wish we could get some kind of motivation into the public to step forward and speak their minds against this. I know there's some out there because I meet them after every meeting in 2s and 3s. But from what I've seen, the opposition is extremely well organized, and it comes from, do I dare say this on record? I suppose. It comes from a real estate company in Jupiter. It started out there originally. They're organized. A lot of the negative information I had was presented to me here in Vero Beach by a real estate agent who was part of that network and was getting fed that stuff. And when you read the papers, you thought, there can't be that many people coming up with this many ideas that are just plain wrong. It can't be. And Russ Lemon asked me a question. He says, how in the world did this go from 0 to a major firestorm in 1 second flat? I'm paraphrasing him, but he was concerned that the public themselves, it's all of a sudden there's, bam, everybody hates the railroad in literally almost a day. So not everybody feels that way in real life, and I wish we could get people to come forward and...
Yeah.
The opposition certainly was like a flash fire.
Yes.
And there's no question about it. Yeah. But another thing with the travel time for business people, the travel time on the train is productive time.
Right.
Travel time in your car is not productive time.
That's right.
Yeah. Mr. Holt, you made a very powerful argument for the positives of having a station here, a stop here. Long term, the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Agency has been working on a plan to bring Amtrak down the East Coast, and they would have 7 stops, of which Vero Beach would be 1, Fort Pierce would be 1, Cocoa would be 1, Melbourne would be 1, etc. St. Augustine as such, and that can't happen unless there was a double track. Amtrak requires a double track. So that in reality, moving forward for having a station in Vero Beach probably is not going to be on the All Aboard Florida project. I don't. Looking at what they're talking about and everything, it does not seem to me feasible within the near future that they would do that. The more likely is if Amtrak does establish an East Coast thing, that's where we would get a stop rather than, and we wouldn't be able to go directly to Orlando. We'd be able to go directly to West Palm, but not to Orlando because we'd be going up to St. Augustine and Jacksonville as opposed. So anyway, that's where I think is where the future of having a station stop here in Vero Beach is going to come from.
My understanding is that Amtrak is always using the CSX lines.
They are.
And that the
But they don't serve. They want to serve the East Coast. They want to serve the 7 stops along the way as well.
Right.
That's what they're working on with the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Agency.
Yeah.
I just wanted you to be aware of that. That's all.
I don't think that's going to happen myself.
Well, I think it's more likely to happen than all aboard Florida doing what
in the short haul, I think you can safely say within the next 3 years is a 100% chance that it will not happen.
Right.
Because we already know what they've said they're going to do, and that's, there's no arguments there.
No argument. It'd be more than that. It'd be 4 or 5 years at least before they do. There's no question about that. That's what I'm saying. It's more likely that if we get a double track through here, that Amtrak will be looking at extending their service along the East Coast by taking advantage of that.
Well, since the FEC controls those tracks, and if all of these naysayers with the Panama Canal stories are true, there won't be any room on the tracks for 164 trains a day. I'm exaggerating.
Well, that's one of the areas where where people are creating numbers out of the air that don't pass scrutiny.
Right.
One more question from Mr. Pezzicelli, please.
No, I have no question for you, sir. I wanted to ask something on a different venue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Daig, at the April meeting, I had requested that there be some kind of safety study by the police, the fire, EMTs. Has that happened, and have we received any reports?
We have not received a report as this date.
Is there something
I'll let
that
the city manager address that. And we're still into public input, and thank you for your patience, ma'am.
I believe the police chief did provide information on accidents, and that is part of the record, I believe. Tammy did.
Yes, I will pull that out and send it to everybody again.
So that was early on. Now, we have not made contact with EMT or any of that.
That's, I think, what he's
I
looking
was
for.
not that concerned in that aspect of it, but input as to perhaps if he had any expertise in terms of gates and other safety areas rather than just accidents. That's easy to get, accident profiles. I'm talking about things that the fire company, the EMTs might see to improve the safety should these trains come through.
And the fire and ambulance may have comments on that. The police chief and I have talked about this whole situation, and it really does not have any real major impact upon them at all. And input as to the time that the gates would stay down have not really been significant, because we just have not seen anything that would indicate what's presently existing is a danger. And then the theory is that there's going to be more upgrades. We have not seen what those upgrades are going to be, and until we see that plan, we would not.
Well, there was one crossing, I believe, that was of concern. That I think at one point there was a discussion that perhaps that crossing had to be closed down.
It did not have to be, but there is discussion if we're going to close a crossing. The theory is what we were told early on, if you close a crossing, that frees up about $100,000 worth of improvements that FRC would have to make. And I believe Mr. Roberts indicated that $100,000 could go toward additional safety improvements on other crossings that might meet the sound issue.
Okay.
But there is one crossing that in many people's mind is sort of limited, and it goes at an angle as opposed to straight across.
Right.
And if we were going to close the crossing, that would be one. But again, it's one way, and we have not seen any significant accidents there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. As our next speaker comes up, for the record, Ms. Chandler had to leave from the meeting. She has another appointment that she had to make, so that's why she had left. Please state your name and address for the record, ma'am.
Rosemary Wilson, 1490 Fifth Avenue. 99% of the individuals that I have talked with and I have listened to are against the all aboard Florida. I believe this is a ploy and also a fraud, as Mr. Gafanti said, and the reason is this. The expansion of the tracks and the infrastructure are for a reason, and it isn't just for passenger rail. We know that a Port of Miami is being expanded. We know that there are huge refrigeration sites, acres and acres and acres, to hold products coming in from South America. We know that the Panama Canal is being expanded. We know that Port Everglades is being expanded. We have maps showing how this is all going to be distributed up the east coast of Florida through the United States. So it's the money. Follow the money. Do we really want to allow the Florida East Coast industries to reduce our property values and negatively affect businesses, our quality of life, and our safety? Passenger rail has been notoriously unprofitable in modern times. People simply don't take trains in a country that is built for cars when just about everyone owns at least one car. Suspicious of Florida East Coast Industries' claims about the viability of another passenger train, Florida Not All Aboard, an entity in Martin County, is against the project, asked for the feasibility study conducted by FECI. Despite the efforts of many, no one has been able to gain access to the study. This again raises suspicion that FECI has ulterior motives, and we believe it's the freight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Wilson, wouldn't they have the ability to put whatever freight trains they want on the lines as they exist without any of the all-aboard Florida
As they exist,
improvements?
I have no idea. I don't know what the laws are and what the rules are. I have no idea.
Anyone else? Come right up, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. I'm Haynes McDaniel, 2715 52nd Avenue. Let an old man rattle on for just a moment. As I understand it, the rails were built through here in December of 1893. And I moved here in 1961. At that time, there were 5 trains a day each way that you could ride. They stopped at the station just about 3 blocks from here. 3 of them went to New York, 1 went on to Boston, 1 went to Chicago, and 1 went to Jacksonville. It was the local. But you could get off in Jacksonville and catch a train that went to Atlanta, Knoxville, Nashville, and St. Louis, or catch another one that went to Tallahassee, Mobile, and New Orleans. And thing that interested me and that I found very exciting was that the local hotels would send their station wagons down here to meet the passengers that were going to stay at the hotels. So they'd take them over to the beach or some hotels in the downtown area, and they were well patronized. There were always a bunch of people waiting to catch the train or getting off of the train. I think it could all be done again. And it's my understanding that Amtrak got to talking about running a train down here about 15 years ago. They never got anywhere until March of 2012, and it's never been reported that approval or agreement was made between the state of Florida, the Florida East Coast Railway, and Amtrak to resume operations of up to 2 trains a day each way through here. They could get into some nice scheduling to make connections at Jacksonville and renew that one that went to New Orleans that was discontinued after track damage to Katrina that the government rebuilt the tracks for, but nobody's ever mentioned it, and no passenger train has run on it since. There's a lot of potential here. There are a lot of people, I think, that would like to come to Vero Beach and spend a little time, and it's a great place to stay and a great place to live. I think we all agree on that, and we'd like to have them. As far as All Aboard Florida goes, I've written a couple of letters to some of their folks. If they could stop every 4th train, starting with the first one in Cocoa, the next in Melbourne, the next here, and the next in Fort Pierce, or going the other way, we would have 4 trains a day at different times of the day that we could take to West Palm, Fort Lauderdale, or Miami, or to the airport in Orlando. If you're going to take a plane and fly to California from Orlando, you can drive up there and park your car for $20 a day. To me, it'd be a whole lot easier just to jump on a train here and get off at the airport and hop on the plane and go to wherever you want to go. And I think there is a lot of potential if it could be used for for everyone's benefit. And I really would like to see All Aboard Florida stop in Vero Beach, whether the station's this block or that block or the next one. At one time, I thought that double track up in the hospital direction near the airport would be a great place, because it is double track. A train could stop and another one run around it. But then I got to thinking, let's see, if my wife was waiting for the train and it was the middle of the night, I'm not quite so sure about the neighborhood. Where Vero Beach, I would feel pretty secure about it. But there is a lot of potential. And if we could have a train stop here from All Aboard Florida several times a day, it would add 5 minutes to the schedule if each train made one stop. It would be real beneficial for everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the general public like to make comments? All right, at this time, I'm going to ask that we take a 7-minute recess, if that's okay, and we'll reconvene. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, we have 4 people.